They say blood is thicker than water. It's a lovely sentiment, something you see embroidered on throw pillows. But I'm here to tell you that money isn't water. Money is a solvent. It's an acid that can dissolve bonds that took a lifetime to forge, eating through loyalty and love until nothing is left but the raw, gaping maw of greed. I learned that on a Tuesday, and by Friday, my daughter learned it too. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 68 years old. For 45 of those years, I was a wife. For 41, I've been a mother. For the last 5, a widow. I lived, in a modest 3-bedroom house in Scottsdale, Arizona. A house my husband David and I bought when the earth around it was still just sun-scorched dirt and promises. We filled that house with laughter, the smell of baking bread, the scuff marks of a toddler's first steps, and eventually the profound silence of grief after David was gone. David was a good man, a structural engineer, meticulous, cautious, and a planner. He saw the world in terms of stress points and load-bearing walls. He believed in foundations, both in buildings and in life. His passing was sudden, cruel, and wrong. A faulty piece of medical equipment during a routine heart procedure. A tiny, defective valve that cost me the love of my life. For years, I was too lost in my sorrow to even consider fighting. But my daughter Jessica was different. Jessica was my world, my only child, with her father's sharp blue eyes, but a spirit that was all fire where he was earth. After David died, she was the one who pushed for the lawsuit against the medical device manufacturer, MedTech Solutions. She said it was about justice for her father. I believed her. For 5 long years, it was a slow, grinding battle of depositions, paperwork, and lawyers, whose hourly rates made my head spin. I did it for David's memory. Jessica, I see now, did it for the jackpot at the end of the rainbow. During those 5 years, I supported her. She was a freelance graphic designer, which was a fashionable way of saying she was mostly unemployed, flitting between small projects and complaining about the creative suffocation of the corporate world. I paid her rent on her trendy downtown apartment. I covered her car insurance. My modest nurse's pension and David's life insurance were stretched thin. But what was I to do? She was my daughter, my only link to the man I loved. Then came the call. It was from our lawyer, a sharp man named Mr. Peterson. MedTech had decided to settle. They didn't want the publicity of a trial. The number he quoted over the phone felt like a misprint, a joke. $33 million. $33 million. I remember sinking into David's old armchair, the worn leather sighing under my weight. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't joy I felt, but a crushing, overwhelming sense of finality. This was the price they put on my husband's life. 33 million pieces of silver. Jessica, however, reacted differently. I called her immediately, my voice trembling. She screamed. Not a scream of grief or vindication, but a high, piercing shriek of pure, unadulterated ecstasy, like she'd just won the Powerball. "Oh my God, Mom! We're rich! We are filthy rich!" That was the first crack in the foundation. She said we, but her tone said me. The money was wired a week later. The legal structure stated that as David's surviving spouse and the primary plaintiff, the funds would be transferred to an account in my name. From there, we had agreed. A simple, verbal agreement between a mother and daughter who trusted each other, that we would divide it. I only wanted enough to live comfortably, to fix the leaky roof and maybe travel to see the Scottish Highlands David had always dreamed of. The rest was for her. I wanted her to be secure, to have the life of creativity and freedom she always claimed she wanted. The day the wire transfer cleared, Jessica arrived at my house. She wasn't alone. Tailing her like a sleek, predatory shadow was her boyfriend of 6 months, Mark Sterling. Mark was a walking cliché of a con man, impeccably dressed, teeth too white, a smile that never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes. He called me Eleanor, with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. He was a wealth management consultant, of course. They sat on my sofa, the one David and I had picked out together 20 years ago. Jessica didn't look at me. She looked at Mark, who held her hand and did most of the talking. "Eleanor," he began, his voice smooth as silk, "Jessica and I have been having a very serious discussion about the future. This kind of money, it's not just a windfall, it's a responsibility. It requires a new way of thinking, a paradigm shift." I just stared at him. A paradigm shift. Jessica finally spoke, her voice brittle. "What Mark is saying, Mum, is that things have to change. We need to be smart about this. We can't be sentimental." A cold dread began to seep into my bones. "Sentimental about what, sweetheart?" Mark squeezed her hand. "About assets, Eleanor. Non-performing assets. This house, for instance. It's on a prime piece of land, but the structure itself is dated. The property taxes are a drain. From an investment standpoint, its value is in the land it sits on. Tearing it down and developing it would yield a significant return." I felt the blood drain from my face. My voice was a whisper. "Tear it down? Jessica, this is our home. This is where you grew up. Your father built the back deck with his own 2 hands." Jessica finally met my gaze. Her blue eyes, her father's eyes, were as cold and hard as chips of ice. "Dad's gone, Mum. We have to look forward, not back. We're talking about generational wealth here. We can't be held back by old wood and memories." The cruelty of it stole my breath. Held back? I'm not holding anyone back. This house is paid for. It's my home. "Well, that's the other thing," Mark chimed in, leaning forward as if sharing a delightful secret. "It's time you started living a little, Eleanor. We've found a wonderful, state-of-the-art retirement community for you. Golden Horizons. It has a golf course, organized activities. You'll be with people your own age, all your needs taken care of." They had a glossy brochure. I looked at the smiling, silver-haired seniors playing shuffleboard. It looked like a luxury prison. The conversation devolved from there. It was no longer a discussion. It was a decree. The settlement money, they explained, had been immediately transferred from my account into a new series of investment portfolios and a trust. A trust that Mark had helped Jessica set up. A trust that I had no access to. They had done it the moment the money had cleared, using a power of attorney form I'd signed months ago for the lawsuit, thinking it was just procedural paperwork. My lawyer, Mr. Peterson, had retired right after the case, and his firm had handed everything over to Jessica's new team. "But that was my money," I stammered, the world tilting on its axis. Legally, it was transferred to me. "It was a procedural step, Mum," Jessica said, waving a dismissive hand. "The lawsuit was on behalf of Dad's estate, and I'm his heir. It's my inheritance. You just held it for a moment. Mark says it's much safer this way for tax purposes." The lie was so bold, so audacious, I couldn't even process it. I was her mother, not a temporary holding bank. The final blow came with a sickening thud. "We'll need you to be out of the house by the end of the week, Mum," Jessica said, standing up and smoothing down her designer dress. "The demolition crews are scheduled for the 15th. We've already paid the deposit on your first 3 months at Golden Horizons. A moving van will be here on Friday to take whatever personal items you want to keep. They have a storage unit for the rest." I stared at her. My daughter. A stranger wearing her face. The little girl whose scraped knees I had kissed, whose fevers I had cooled, whose heartbreaks I had mended. She was looking at me like I was a piece of old furniture that no longer matched the decor. "Jessica," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "Please, Don't do this. This is everything I have left of your father." Her face hardened. "Don't you dare use Dad against me. He would have wanted me to be smart and secure, not tied to some dusty old house. Honestly, Mum, it's time you stood on your own 2 feet. You've been leaning on me and my finances for years." The sheer, staggering audacity of that lie knocked the wind out of me. I, who had paid her rent for a decade, was the financial drain. I, who had sacrificed my own small comforts so she could chase her dreams, was the burden. It was a reality so twisted, so inverted, that I felt a moment of pure, disorienting vertigo. Mark put his arm around her. "Your mother is just emotional, baby. She'll see it's for the best." I stood up, my body trembling with a rage so cold and deep it scared me. "Get out," I whispered. "Mum, get out of my house." They left. As the front door clicked shut, I collapsed back into David's chair, the silence of the house pressing in on me. They had taken everything. Not just the money, but my past, my present, my future. They had taken my daughter. That was Tuesday. Wednesday and Thursday were a blur of numb despair. I packed a few boxes, but my heart wasn't in it. Every object I touched screamed a memory. David's favourite coffee mug. The faded photograph of a 3-year-old Jessica on a tricycle. The quilt my own mother had made. How do you condense a life into a few cardboard boxes? I felt utterly and completely alone. Defeated. An old woman discarded by her own child. I spent Thursday night on the floor, wrapped in my mother's quilt, crying until there were no tears left. I was supposed to be out by noon on Friday. My new life at Golden Horizons awaited. On Friday morning, around 8 a.m., I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cold cup of tea when a thought, a tiny flicker of a memory, surfaced through the fog of my grief. It was a memory of David. David, the meticulous planner. The man who had 3 different types of insurance. A fireproof safe in the basement, and a will so detailed it specified who should get his collection of vintage woodworking tools. He didn't trust easily. He loved Jessica with all his heart, but he wasn't blind to her impulsive nature, her penchant for the shiny and new, her casual disregard for consequences. I remembered a conversation we had years ago, after Jessica, then 19, had maxed out a credit card we'd given her for emergencies on a trip to Cancun with her friends. David had been furious, but also thoughtful. "It's not that she's a bad person, Eleanor," he'd said, pacing in his workshop. "She just doesn't see the stress points. She sees the beautiful facade, not the steel beams holding it up. Money, for her, is an idea, not a tool. We need to protect her from herself." The memory sharpened. I remembered us going to see our old family lawyer, a wonderful, semi-retired gentleman named Alistair Finch. Not the slick shark from the big firm who handled the settlement, but our personal lawyer. A man of integrity and tweed jackets who had handled our wills and the deed to our house. We had set up a trust, a fail-safe. It was called the Vance Family Legacy Trust. My heart started beating like a drum. I scrambled for the old roll-top desk in the study, my hands shaking so badly I could barely open the drawers. I tore through files, through old tax returns and insurance policies, until my fingers brushed against a thick, leather-bound folder. Vance Family Legacy Trust, executed the 15th of May, 2008. I opened it. My eyes, blurry with a mixture of hope and fear, scanned the dense legalese. And then I saw it. David's genius. His final act of love and protection. The settlement from any legal action pertaining to his death was not legally designated for his heir in the general sense. It was designated to be paid directly into this trust. Jessica had not been the outright owner of the money. She was named the primary beneficiary of the trust, a crucial distinction. And I, Eleanor Vance, his surviving spouse, was named as the sole, unassailable executor. I had the power. I had all the power. But there was more. David, my brilliant, cautious David, had added a specific clause. Mr. Finch had called it the familial duty and care clause. It was a bit archaic, he'd said, but perfectly legal. It stipulated in no uncertain terms that for the beneficiary, Jessica, to receive disbursements from the trust, she must ensure the continued welfare, housing, and financial security of the surviving parent, me. The clause explicitly stated that any action that resulted in the eviction, financial hardship, or emotional distress of the executor would constitute a material breach of the trust agreement. In the event of such a breach, the executor was granted full discretionary power to freeze all assets, halt any and all disbursements, and redesignate the beneficiaries as she sees fit to honor the original intent of the trust, the preservation of the family's well-being. I read it once, then twice. A slow, spreading warmth filled my chest, chasing away the cold dread. It was the ghost of my husband's arms, wrapping around me one last time. He had seen it. He had known this might happen. He had built me a fortress and left me the key. My daughter, in her breathtaking greed, had not just thrown me out of my house. She had legally and irrevocably disinherited herself. I looked at the clock. 9:15 a.m. The movers were coming in less than 3 hours. I picked up the phone. I didn't call Jessica. I didn't call Mark. I found the number for Alistair Finch. He was in his 80s now, but his voice on the phone was as sharp and clear as I remembered. "Mr. Finch," I said, my own voice steady and clear for the first time in days. "It's Eleanor Vance. I need your help. It seems there has been a material breach of my husband's trust." The next 2 hours were a whirlwind of controlled, quiet fury. Mr. Finch, God bless his tweed-loving soul, was magnificent. He was personally offended by what the new school sharks had done. A power of attorney for a lawsuit does not grant carte blanche to redirect the entirety of a settlement. It's an egregious overreach. He boomed over the phone. He made 3 calls. The first was to the compliance department of the private bank, where Mark had set up the new accounts. He faxed them the original trust documents and my sworn affidavit. He explained, in chillingly precise legal terms, that the transfer of funds from my name into the new trust was fraudulent, as it violated the terms of the pre-existing, legally superior Vance Family Legacy Trust. He informed them that as the sole executor, I was invoking my right to freeze any and all assets and accounts associated with the funds, pending a full investigation. The second call was to the real estate agency handling the sale of my house. He informed them that the owner of the property, myself, had not authorized the sale, and that any attempt to proceed would be met with significant legal action. The demolition permit, he discovered, had been filed under Jessica's name, another fraudulent act. The third call was to a contact of his at American Express. He reported the Centurion card, the mythical black card, that Jessica had undoubtedly acquired, as fraudulently obtained using assets that did not belong to her. "There," Mr. Finch said, his voice laced with grim satisfaction. "The trap is set. All we have to do now is wait for the mouse to find out the cheese is gone." I hung up the phone. The moving van was due at noon. Jessica and Mark were planning to meet them here to supervise my pathetic exodus. I waited. The last 2 days had been hell. But as I sat there in David's chair in my home, I felt a profound sense of peace. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was for David. Around 1 p.m., well past the movers' scheduled arrival, I watched Jessica's brand new car, a ludicrously expensive-looking white Maserati, screech to a halt in my driveway. She and Mark got out. They were dressed for a celebration. Jessica was in a silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. and Mark was in a suit so sharp you could cut yourself on the creases. Their faces, however, were masks of thunderous rage. Jessica stormed up to the door and began hammering on it with her fist. "Mum, what the hell is going on? The movers said the job was cancelled. We just tried to have lunch at Le Cirque and my card was declined. Declined! Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was?" I opened the door and looked at her. I said nothing. Mark pushed past her, his charming facade completely gone, replaced by a snarl. "What did you do, you old bat? Did you call the bank? You're messing with things you don't understand." "On the contrary, Mark," I said, my voice calm and even. "For the first time in a week, I am understanding everything perfectly. Please, come in. We have things to discuss." They stepped into the living room, looking around with confusion and impatience. "This is ridiculous," Jessica snapped, tapping her foot. "Whatever little tantrum you're throwing, it needs to stop. We have a meeting with the architect at 3. "I'm afraid you'll have to cancel that meeting," I said softly. I gestured to the coffee table, where I had laid out a single document, the Familial Duty and Care Clause page from the trust. "You should probably read this, both of you." Jessica glanced at it with contempt. "I'm not reading anything. The lawyers handled all the paperwork. It's done." Mark, however, being slightly more intelligent in his avarice, picked it up. He read it. His face, already pale with anger, turned the colour of ash. He read it again, his mouth slightly agape. "What is this?" he whispered, looking at me. "That," I replied, "is the foundation. The part of the building you don't see, but the part that holds everything up. It's a page from the Vance Family Legacy Trust, established in 2008. The trust to which the settlement money was legally bound to be deposited. A trust of which I am the sole executor." I let the words hang in the air. Jessica looked from Mark's horrified face to my calm one, a dawning, panicked confusion on hers. "What is she talking about, Mark? What trust? You said our trust was the only one." "Your father, Jessica," I continued, my voice as cold and hard as I could make it, "loved you very much. But he was not a fool. He knew you were impulsive. He built a firewall to protect his legacy, and to protect you from your own worst instincts. That firewall had one simple condition. To benefit from his legacy, you had to take care of his wife. You had to take care of me." I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the rose bushes David had planted. "When you came here on Tuesday and told me you were selling my home, putting me in a facility and casting me aside like a piece of garbage, you didn't just break my heart. You breached the contract. You set off the alarm. You forfeited your claim." Jessica just stared, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. No, that can't be right. Mark," she pleaded, turning to him. Mark threw the paper down on the table. "She's bluffing. The money is in our accounts. It's a done deal." "Is it, Mark?" I asked, turning back to face them. "Why don't you try to check the account balance right now? Or better yet, try to call the contractor you hired to tear down my house, or the real estate agent, or the Maserati dealership. You will find that the $33 million you thought you had has vanished. It hasn't gone far. It has simply been returned to its rightful place. The Vance Family Legacy Trust, under my complete and total control." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Jessica's ragged breathing. The colour drained from her face. The reality of what I was saying, the sheer catastrophic magnitude of it, finally hit her. "No," she whispered. No, you can't. Mum, I wouldn't have had to," I said, the sorrow finally creeping back into my voice. "All you had to do was be a daughter. All you had to do was show an ounce of love, of respect for your father's memory. You were given a kingdom, and you threw it all away because you were too greedy to let your own mother keep her home." That's when Mark showed his true colours. The mask didn't just slip. He tore it off and stomped on it. "You stupid bitch," he screamed, not at me, but at Jessica. I told you to handle it carefully. I told you to play nice until everything was clear. But you had to be a cruel little princess, didn't you? You had to rub her nose in it. You've ruined everything." "Me?" Jessica shrieked back, her voice cracking with hysteria. "This was your idea. You were the one talking about non-performing assets and paradigm shifts. They were like two rats trapped in a cage, turning on each other. It was ugly, pathetic, and I felt a profound, weary sadness watching it. This was the man she had chosen over me. This was the life she had wanted." Mark turned and stormed towards the door. "I'm done. This is over. Don't call me." "Mark, wait," Jessica cried, running after him. "Where are you going? We can fix this." "Mark." He didn't even look back. He got into the white Maserati, a car that I now technically owned, and roared out of the driveway, leaving a strip of rubber on the asphalt. He left her standing there on the lawn, a broken doll in a ridiculously expensive dress. Jessica slowly turned back to me, her face streaked with tears and makeup. The arrogance was gone. The cruelty was gone. All that was left was a terrified, pathetic child. She stumbled back into the house and fell to her knees in front of me, literally, on her knees on the hardwood floor. "Mum," she sobbed, grabbing at the hem of my pants. "Mum, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I didn't mean it. It was Mark. He got in my head. Please, Mum, you have to fix this. You have to give the money back. Please, I'm begging you. I have nothing." He left me with nothing. It was Friday. 3 days ago, she had thrown me out. Now she was on her knees begging for my help. I looked down at my daughter, this stranger at my feet, and I felt nothing. The love was still there, buried under layers of scar tissue, but the trust, the respect, the simple, easy affection, that was gone, wiped clean. "Get up, Jessica," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Begging won't help you." But what am I going to do?" she wailed. "The apartment, the car. It was all tied to the new accounts. I have nothing." I reached into my purse and pulled out my wallet. I took out $200 and held it out to her. "Here," I said. "This is enough for a bus ticket back to your apartment, if the landlord hasn't already been notified, and some groceries. The Maserati is parked at the curb. I'll be calling a service to have it picked up in an hour. It will be sold, along with every other ludicrous thing you bought in the last 3 days. The proceeds will be returned to the trust." She stared at the money in my hand as if it were a snake. $200? Mum, that's an insult. "No, Jessica," I said, my voice hardening. "An insult is what you did to me on Tuesday. This is a lifeline, a very, very small one. The same kind of lifeline you were leaving me when you planned to ship me off to Golden Horizons." I put the money on the table. "Your father's legacy will not be squandered on silk dresses and fast cars. I am going to honor him. I'm establishing a foundation in his name to help families who have been victims of medical malpractice. I'm going to fix my roof, and I am going to travel to Scotland, and I will sprinkle some of his ashes on a hillside overlooking the sea, just like he always wanted." I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw the depth of the chasm between us. "As for you," I said, "your access to the trust is terminated. You violated its most sacred clause. If you want a relationship with me, if you want to find your way back into this family, it won't be through money. It will start with you getting a job, a real one. It will start with you paying your own rent. It will start with you taking a long, hard look in the mirror and figuring out how you became a person who would throw her own mother out into the street for money. And when you've done that, when you've truly started to rebuild your own foundation based on character instead of cash, you can call me. Until then, I have nothing more to say to you." She just knelt there, sobbing, as I walked past her and into the kitchen to make myself a fresh cup of tea. The battle was over. I had won. But standing there, listening to the sound of my only child's heart breaking because of her own greed, I can tell you with all honesty, it didn't feel like a victory at all. It just felt like the end. The end of the daughter I thought I knew, and the beginning of a life I never asked for, but now had to live. Alone, but finally on solid ground. David's ground.